When a woman ignores you, the first thing most men do is panic. They get restless, they start overthinking, and they immediately jump to the conclusion that something is wrong with them. They start replaying every word they said, every move they made, every text they sent, wondering where the mistake happened. And in that desperation, they do the worst thing possible. They chase harder. They text more, they call more, they beg for attention, they lower their standards, and in the process, they hand over all of their power. But what if I told you that the right way to handle being ignored isn't to prove yourself, isn't to plead, and definitely isn't to fight for a place in someone's life that doesn't want to give it? The right way to respond is to destroy the ego behind the act of ignoring you. When you start shifting your attention away from the woman who ignores you and toward the man you're becoming, something powerful happens. Your presence becomes more magnetic. People notice the energy shift in you, and that includes her. What once was a man who seemed desperate for her validation is now a man who no longer needs it. And nothing shakes the foundation of someone's ego more than realizing the control they thought they had is completely gone. Because here's the truth: ego feeds on reaction. If you don't react, you cut off the food supply. And when you cut off the food supply, the ego starves it with us. It collapses. That's not something you do with anger, with shouting, with long arguments. You do it quietly, calmly, with the steady discipline of self-respect. Think of all the times you've seen people try to get attention. Maybe on social media, maybe in relationships, maybe in friendships. They post, they perform, they provoke, all for reaction. Without reaction, there's no payoff. Ignoring is the same. When a woman ignores you to elevate herself, the unspoken goal is to get you to break, to get you to come running, begging, proving, pleading. That reaction is the payoff. It validates the belief that she holds the throne and you are the one circling it. When you deny her that reaction, the throne starts to feel empty. She begins to wonder if the crown she imagined herself wearing was ever real. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't require cruelty. You don't have to insult her. You don't have to play games in return. You don't have to make a scene. In fact, the less noise you make, the stronger your presence becomes. It's like walking away from a burning building without looking back. People expect you to panic, to scream, to cry. But when you walk out calmly without hesitation, it unsettles them. Because calmness in the face of games is power. Calmness in the face of disrespect is the loudest answer you can give. And here's something many men don't realize. When you stop giving your energy to someone who ignores you, you open yourself up to people who will never ignore you. Respect creates space for respect. If you're holding on to someone who plays games with your emotions, you're blocking the path for someone who would treat you with consistency and value. And often, the universe has a way of showing you that the second you let go of disrespect, real respect starts walking into your life. The woman who ignored you may eventually circle back, but by then, you'll be so focused on the abundance around you that her return won't feel like salvation. It will feel like an unnecessary interruption. But I want to press on something deeper. The reason ignoring hurts so much is because it awakens the wound of rejection. It whispers to you, you're not enough. You're not worthy. You don't matter. That's why people spiral when they're ignored. They think the silence confirms those fears. But destroying her ego also means destroying that voice inside you. You remind yourself that being ignored is not evidence of your inadequacy. It's evidence of her inability to communicate. It's evidence of her immaturity or her insecurity or her desire to control. It is never proof that you are unworthy. The moment you anchor that truth into your spirit, the sting of being ignored fades. Because now, instead of seeing her silence as a reflection of you, you see it as a reflection of her. That shift alone is enough to make her ego tremble, because the weapon she thought would wound you no longer has power. Every man must decide, am I going to live my life reacting to the whims of others, or am I going to live grounded in my own worth? If you choose the first, you will always be pulled back and forth like a puppet. If you choose the second, you cut the strings, you stand firm, you live free. And that is the real destruction of the ego, not an outward explosion, but an inward refusal to be controlled. Now think about what happens when she finally realizes her silence hasn't worked. She might test you again just to be sure. Maybe she pops back up after days of ignoring you, acting casual, saying, hey, what's up? Expecting you to jump at the opportunity. But instead you respond with calm indifference. Not anger, not bitterness, but simply measured detachment. You don't rush to reply. You don't pour out excitement. You treat the conversation for what it is, a small interaction, not a rescue mission. And in that moment, she feels the shift. She realizes her absence didn't devastate you. Her silence didn't break you. Her return doesn't control you. That moment is where ego shatters because it collides with reality. She does not own you. And what if she doesn't come back? What if the silence is permanent? Then you've won even bigger, because instead of wasting months or years chasing someone who never respected you, you freed yourself early. You gave yourself the gift of time. Time to grow, time to build, time to meet people who match your value. Too many men waste their best years begging for the attention of someone who never deserved them. Don't let that be your story. Destroying her ego is not about revenge, it's about redemption. Redeeming your time, your dignity, your energy. I know this sounds easier said than done. I know some of you are struggling to let go of that craving for her attention. But think about it. What exactly are you craving? Is it really her, or is it the validation she once gave you? Because often what hurts the most isn't the person, it's the withdrawal from the drug of validation. And when you understand that, you stop chasing the dealer and start building your own supply. You stop needing someone else to hand you confidence because you're creating it inside yourself. And when you create it yourself, no one can take it away. That is the deepest destruction of the ego when you become self-sufficient in your worth. Let's take this further. When a woman ignores you and you respond with strength, you're not just teaching her a lesson, you're teaching yourself discipline. You're teaching yourself how to master your emotions, how to hold steady under pressure, how to stand tall when your ego is begging you to collapse. And that discipline will serve you in every area of life. Because if you can control yourself when someone you're attracted to is playing games, you can control yourself in business, in conflict, in leadership, in every arena that demands patience and composure. The battlefield of relationships is training ground for the battlefield of life. If you learn to win here, you'll win everywhere. Imagine for a moment that you no longer flinch when someone ignores you. Imagine that instead of spiraling into doubt, you immediately shift into focus. Imagine that instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you ask, "What can I build next?" That mindset alone separates you from 90% of men out there. That mindset alone makes you unstoppable because now no silence can shake you. No rejection can break you. No absence can paralyze you. You've destroyed the ego games outside of you by first destroying the weakness inside of you. And let's not ignore this reality sometimes. Women ignore men not because of ego, but because they sense weakness, they sense desperation, they sense a lack of confidence. And instead of being honest, they pull away. That's why the work you do on yourself is so critical. When you become a man of purpose, a man of discipline, a man of confidence, you automatically command respect. Ignoring you no longer makes sense, because your value is undeniable. And if someone still chooses to ignore that, it's no loss to you. It's their blindness, not your inadequacy. So here's the principle you must engrave in your mind. Attention is earned, not begged for. Respect is mutual, not one-sided. And dignity is priceless, never to be traded for temporary affection. Every time you uphold that principle, you are tearing down the fragile walls of ego that people try to build around you. Every time you walk away from disrespect, you are reminding yourself that your worth does not depend on anyone else's recognition. And don't be surprised when the very woman who ignored you starts chasing you later. Because the truth is, when you stop chasing, you create space for pursuit. When you stop feeding her ego, she may start seeking the very attention she once withheld. And by then, you'll be in the position of choice. Not desperation, not begging, but choice. Do you allow her back in, or do you continue forward without her? Either way, you've already won. Because the victory was never about getting her back. It was about getting yourself back. Think about how liberating that is. No longer waking up wondering why she hasn't texted. No longer pacing around wondering what you did wrong. No longer waiting by the phone for crumbs of attention. Instead, you wake up focused on your goals. You wake up chasing your own dreams. You wake up filled, not empty. That shift doesn't just destroy her ego. It rebuilds yours. It makes you whole again. It makes you a man again. It makes you untouchable. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you'll never want to go back. Because why would you ever trade your peace for someone else's games? Why would you ever trade your dignity for someone else's silence? Why would you ever hand over the keys to your happiness to someone who doesn't even know how to drive their own? No. You walk differently when you realize your value. You talk differently. You move differently. You're no longer afraid of being ignored because you know the only opinion that truly matters is the one you hold about yourself. That is how you destroy her ego. By becoming a man who doesn't need her validation to stand tall, by refusing to chase when she withdraws, by redirecting your focus toward growth instead of games, by living in such a way that her silence is irrelevant, her absence is unnoticeable, her attempts at control are powerless. That is not cruelty, it is clarity. That is not bitterness, it is strength. That is not revenge, it is evolution. When you build yourself to the point where someone's silence no longer shakes you, you've already shifted into a higher state of being. Because the truth is, the more you evolve, the more you realize that attention is not love. Someone can give you attention today and take it away tomorrow, but real love, real respect, real connection does not vanish in silence. It doesn't play games, it doesn't manipulate. The ones who ignore you to fuel their ego are not offering love. They're offering control disguised as intimacy. And when you recognize that, you stop chasing shadows, you stop feeding illusions, you stop tying your worth to whether or not your phone lights up. And here's where the transformation deepens. Once you decide to stop playing the role of the one who waits, You start taking ownership of your presence. You start realizing that you are not a man begging for a seat at someone else's table. You are the table. You are the value. You are the consistency. You are the prize. That shift is radical because it flips the power dynamic completely. Instead of asking yourself, why won't she give me her attention? You begin asking, why would I give my attention to someone who withholds? That's a reversal that breaks egos in half because it no longer places the power outside of you. Now imagine this. A woman ignores you for days, thinking she's creating a mystery, thinking she's teaching you how much she's in control. Then she finally comes back with a casual message, expecting you to light up, to act grateful, to pour out energy. But instead, you're calm, detached, busy. You answer, but without the desperation she expected. You don't ask why she was gone. You don't rush to validate her return. You simply continue your life as if her silence changed nothing. Do you realize how disarming that is? She planned for you to collapse, and instead you stood firm. She expected to return to a man broken, but she found a man unbothered. That is ego destruction in its purest form. And the more you live this way, the more you realize that indifference is not cruelty, it's self-respect. You're not ignoring her back out of spite. You're simply refusing to let her absence dictate your emotions. That difference matters because bitterness keeps you chained, but detachment sets you free. And the moment you are free, her power evaporates. She can no longer pull the strings. She can no longer control the rhythm. She can no longer set the rules. And that's the hardest lesson for someone whose ego thrived on manipulation, to realize the game is over because the opponent simply stopped playing. But it's not just about her. It's about the bigger picture of your life. If you can hold your ground here, you can hold your ground anywhere. Think about business. When a deal goes silent, do you panic or do you keep building? Think about friendships. When someone drifts, do you beg or do you adjust? Think about your own purpose. When life ignores your effort for a season, do you crumble or do you keep showing up? The discipline you practice in relationships becomes the discipline you carry everywhere. Destroying the ego game with women is training for destroying the ego games of the world. Let's talk about self-worth, because a man who knows his worth does not panic when ignored. He doesn't beg for explanation. He doesn't lose his identity in the silence. He recognizes that rejection is redirection, that absence is protection, that ignoring is often the loudest confession someone can make about their own character. And so he adjusts. He doesn't lower his value, he elevates his standards. He doesn't punish himself with questions of, why am I not enough? He reframes it. Why would I want someone who doesn't recognize enough when it's right in front of them? That reframe is a blade that cuts through the thickest ego. And the truth is, most of the time, ignoring is not about you, it's about her. Maybe she's trying to inflate her self-image. Maybe she's caught up in gaze. Maybe she's afraid of real intimacy and uses silence as her weapon. Whatever the reason, it is her pattern, not your reflection. But what makes the difference is how you respond. Weak men feed the pattern. Strong men break it. By refusing to chase, by refusing to beg, by refusing to make excuses, you expose the weakness in her game. You show that silence is not strength, it's avoidance. And that truth, when it hits, collapses the ego from the inside out. Now think of how many men are out there begging for a response. Hundreds of texts sent, dozens of calls unanswered, days wasted in confusion. They believe they're fighting for love, but really, they're fueling someone else's ego. Don't let yourself be one of them. Love does not demand you shrink. Respect does not ask you to beg. Connection does not thrive on silence. So why play that part? Why volunteer for that role? The moment you step out of it, you separate yourself from the crowd. You become the rare one, the uncommon man, the man who doesn't just talk about self-respect, but lives it. And here's the paradox: when you stop needing her attention, that's when she starts chasing yours. Because the ego hates indifference. It feeds on attention, whether positive or negative. And when you cut it off completely, it gets restless. It wonders why you're so unbothered. It wonders why you're not like the others. It wonders what you know about yourself that makes you so calm. And curiosity leads to pursuit. The same person who ignored you may end up knocking at your door, trying to earn back what she thought she could toy with. That's the irony of strength. It attracts what weakness could never hold. But the real victory isn't that she comes back. The real victory is that by the time she does, you're no longer starving for it. You're no longer desperate for her return. You're standing in abundance. You've built yourself so well, filled your life so much, grown your spirit so strong that whether she stays or goes makes no difference. That's when you've destroyed the ego completely, because now you're untouchable. Let me remind you of something vital. Dignity is non-negotiable. The second you trade dignity for attention, you've already lost. The second you beg for someone's presence at the cost of your self-respect, you've crowned them king or queen over your life. And no one deserves that throne except you. So guard it. Guard it like your life depends on it. Because in many ways it does. The life you live, the peace you carry, the man you become, all of it depends on whether or not you choose to protect your dignity. And this choice will keep showing up. It's not just one woman, one moment, one situation. Life will test you again and again. Someone will ignore you. Someone will undervalue you. Someone will try to make you prove yourself. And every time you'll face the same decision. Do I feed their ego? Do I protect mine? Do I chase what runs or do I walk with those who stay? Every time you choose yourself, you grow stronger. Every time you choose self-respect, your foundation becomes unshackable. That's why ignoring can actually be a gift. It exposes the truth quickly. It reveals who's real and who's not. It forces you to confront your own worth. And if you use it wisely, it becomes fuel. Fuel to build, to grow, to sharpen yourself. Fuel to remind you that the only validation that truly sustains is the validation you give yourself. Because when you can sit in silence, not panic, not chase, not collapse, but simply breathe and continue, then you are free. And freedom is the most attractive, most powerful, most ego-destroying energy you can carry. And let's not forget this. Women with strong egos often rely on patterns. They've seen men fall before. They've seen men cave to silence. They've seen men lose sleep, lose focus, lose dignity. So when you break that pattern, when you respond differently, it shocks the system. It forces a recalibration. It leaves them asking, who is this man? Why didn't he react like the others? Why isn't he desperate for me? That dissonance is devastating to the ego because the ego thrives on predictability. Break the pattern and you break the power. So the next time you're ignored, remember, the silence is not your enemy, but your training ground. It's the stage where you prove to yourself who you are. It's the mirror that shows you whether you're built on validation or self-worth. And the choice is always yours. You can collapse and feed someone else's ego, or you can rise and destroy it with your calm, your discipline, your growth. One choice keeps you chained. The other makes you free. And freedom is where your power lives.